Hey, we are here. It's Friday. We're in the classroom. So I'm excited to take you guys through a new discovery I made just last night. That there are actually a lot of discoveries. I'm going to take you through some of them, not all of them. I have my trusty assistant here, mathematician, mathematical researcher, Naomi. Say hi.
Hi,
Naomi
guys.
Matthews. And she's going to hold the phone for me here, and she may even ask some questions and stuff too as we go along. I'm going that way I can read comments later on and hopefully get back to some questions because I won't be able to see all the questions all the time. So basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you guys through. Can you tell Eden not to call me? I'm going to. All right. So I sent out last night or posted on Instagram this picture of something I worked on till super late last night. I posted it this morning. I posted my Telegram chat too. And I want to explain to you guys what this is because this is really fundamental. And lately we've been getting probably more kind of mathematical discoveries than we've ever had, I would say. And it's coming in mega fast across the board. So our team is working like crazy to get all this stuff put in a format that we can publish it, right? Which obviously that's one of our big desires to get it out to the world. But I wanted to share this one with you because it's kind of so hot, it's so important, and it's so topical to what's happening in the world today. And so I'm gonna give the phone now to Naomi, and you can turn the camera around so you can basically point it on me if you like. There you go.
Awesome.
All right, so I'm going to start. We're going to do a little bit of teaching today, and we're going to talk first about numbers and the essence of numbers. What is the essence of a number? Now, I've contemplated this question a lot. What is a number actually? And one way to think about number is just that it's a quantity, right? Mathematics is actually originally named by Plato as being the language of everything. All is number. Pythagoras said similar stuff as well. But it was Aristotle who came along and said, no, let's put mathematics in a classification because he's kind of a botanist who wanted to do haplotypes and phylotypes and classify everything in different boxes. And so what he said was mathematics is limited to the study of quantity. So it's the science of quantity. But actually, the original word mathematics meant all learning. All learning. That's why polymath and philomath, philo means lover, math, in this case, means learning. And polymath just means many learnings. So let's talk about the essence of a number and the spirit of a number. So every number has sort of a quantifiable, or let's say a discrete value. From the number 1, 2, 3. So it has a discrete value. But you can also say that these numbers also have an infinite value. That means they have a spirit. So what would their spirit be? If we could do an equation to this number, to transform it into its spirit, to find its essence, what might that be? Well, let me suggest to you, I believe that function is the square root function. So the square root of a number contains its essence. And in a way, you've got 1.4142, and this number goes on forever. So you could say that this is the infinite aspect of the number, and this is the discrete form of the number. So an infinite aspect, discrete form. Some numbers that are prime numbers especially, as well as semi-prime numbers, when you take their reciprocal values, get an infinite aspect as well because it ends up with a wave of distribution. And that wave you can track with a period. So just like 1 over 7 is 0.142857. 142857. It repeats those 6 digits over and over and over again to infinity. Well, if we take the square root of 3, it has a value of 1.732050, and that goes on for infinity as well, right? Now, these are the two most fundamental numbers. So you could say that the spirit of the number 2, which is really a compression of that spirit. Think of this as almost like an avatar for this number, this infinite number. This number gets compressed into this number. And this long number also gets compressed into number 3. Now, we don't realize how important the numbers 2 and 3 really are. We just missed it. I think we kind of don't really focus on it. But actually, when you look at it, these numbers work together to literally create everything that there is. Everything. And when we think about this number 2, this particular number is the diminished fifth in music. Diminished fifth. So that gives you a ratio of 1.4142. So that's really interesting because diminished is not something that sounds really good when we play it. It doesn't sound very good at all. And so somehow this essence of the number 2 is equated to duality. It's the essence of duality, the essence of separation. The 1 gets separated into the 2, and now we have separation. And from that we get light and we get darkness. Now mathematics at school that you learn, a lot of people have a hate relationship with mathematics. Now Naomi doesn't, and I certainly don't, but a lot of people I know don't love mathematics. And the reason they don't love it is because they have not been taught mathematics with meaning. Mathematics without meaning is just information. Mathematics with meaning is communication. It's language. So I'm going to try to step you through some of these aspects of the spiritual meaning behind mathematics, the language of the universe, which is God. So, the essence of duality is the square root of 2. The essence of 3 would give us the Trinity. So we could say this is the spiritual aspect of the Trinity, of threeness. Does that make sense? We often talk about the Trinity as being this beautiful thing, a triangle, right? And there's a relationship in the equilateral triangle. The equilateral triangle has a height relationship of the root 3, and its base, 1/2 its base, will be 1. Root 3 over 1 is the relationship of a right triangle. That is half of an equilateral triangle. And this would be a 60-degree angle right here. So this Trinity relationship is really, really important because it represents divinity. And this, we could say, represents duality. So how do those two things come together? Well, let's take this and say, what happens when we take root 2 plus root 3? Naomi, do you know?
Why? What happens?
Well, what if we add those two numbers together? Do you know? I'll tell you the answer. It's 3.14. Whoa, wait, what's that similar to?
Pi.
Pi. Wait a minute. 6. So 3.146, it's really not far away from a close approximation to pi. Isn't that strange? Have you ever thought about that before?
That is pretty strange.
Right? So wait a minute. So that means, right, that if I have a radius of 1, right, 1, or rather a diameter of 1, then my circumference will be pi, right? And that means that 55%, so let's say that this represents 198 degrees, 55% of this circle is going to be, from the top, the square root of 3. And then the rest of this circle is going to be the square root of 2. And that's 45%. Because root 2 and root 3 together create this 45-55 relationship. Did you know this?
I didn't.
You did not know this. Oh, okay. So if we take 45 and we, in fact, use the exact value for the square root of 2 to find out the number of degrees from here down to here, it turns out that the root 2 equals 161.81 degrees. Does that surprise you?
Awfully close to phi.
Right?
Yep.
Yeah, that's the golden ratio. The golden ratio. So wait a minute. This thing, and we all recognize the golden ratio because the golden ratio is what we find with beauty, right? When we see something like a waist, a very attractive waist, right, on a woman is going to be the golden ratio, right, of the hips. It's going to be a reciprocal relationship. So you got 0.618 and you got 1 right here. We notice this in everything. Even when I make artwork, I don't even try to do golden ratio stuff. It just comes out as golden ratio. Golden ratio is part of what we see as aesthetic beauty. And yet, the golden ratio against a circle that has been made, and by the way, even if I use pi, the correct pi for this, which would be 3.14159, just so you know the difference that this would make. If I use this as my value for pi, then all the difference that this would be is this diameter here would become 1.001. That's the difference we're talking about. 1.001. Now, that's 1/1000th. If I made that a meter, you'd have a hard time even differentiating 1/1000th of a meter. Okay, it's pretty small. It's quite small. If I made it a centimeter, you'd have an impossible time to differentiate it. If I made it, a millimeter, it'd be absolutely impossible for you to even see that. So the point being that there's a relationship, and I'm going to come back to why this is important. There's a relationship between the golden ratio and its relationship to root 3, which is divinity. So we tend to think about duality sometimes as being, it's an ugly world. Ugly world, duality, separation. We don't want to be in this. Get me out of this place, escape room time. But actually, when we pair it together with the square root of 3, we realize that the same ratio that we find as beautiful is made from the square root of 2. Maybe this somehow relates to our own suffering, our own difficulty in the world. All the things that we find unattractive in the world, we ascribe to 2-ness and root 2-ness. And actually, what's happening here is when we combine it with the divinity, the divine aspect, the Trinity, then that ugliness becomes beautiful. Keep that thought. Now, let's talk about music for a moment. So any questions on that, Naomi, so far? Because this is the first time you're hearing this too, obviously.
A little bit of it, yeah. Definitely. I didn't know how the square root of 2 combines with the square root of 3 to create the golden ratio. That was definitely new. Okay. It kind of makes sense though. Why I was gonna ask why square root of 2 is related to the diminished fifth, and like why the diminished fifth, that unpleasant sound, is related to duality. But you kind of answered my question already.
Right. So now let's start looking at musical interval. How can we depict musical interval? I'm going to teach this to you in a very simplistic way first. The simplistic way is this. We can depict this. The best way to define musical interval and knowledge of musical interval is to use triangles. Why is a triangle the best way, the simplest form to use to depict musical interval? Well, because we can look at it this way. This is a height, and this is 1/2 the base of the triangle. Now let's assume that we have another triangle that's underneath this as well. All right, assume that this, I'll try to make this a little bit better for you. Okay, so you've got the full base now, and then you have the depth, I guess, in this case. So you've inverted it. So height over 1/2 the base equals musical interval. And you could take that and multiply it by any Hertz frequency, and that will give you the related interval with that. And I'll define that more for you in a moment. But that's all that it is. Height over 1/2 base of a triangle. So you can think of this in the form of a two-dimensional object you see on a page, or you could leave it in living stone in the form of pyramids. Now, the other side of this, this is why this is so beautiful, to recognize it in its right triangular relationship and full isosceles triangular relationship, is as follows. We can now take the inverted, to find the inverted musical interval. All we do is we take the depth in this case, which is the same as the height. So it's basically we're going to put it this time down here, depth, which is height, and we're going to put full base on top of it. That's it. So, to give you an example, if we have the major third in music, which was just da, da, and then you want to hear a fifth after it, da, 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 that'd be a perfect fifth, right? So, to get to these exact intervals for a major third, it's generally going to be a height of 5 and a 1/2 base of 4. So that's going to give us, in Pythagorean tuning, 5 over 4 equals 1.25. We multiply that by 432 hertz, and you're going to get the major third relationship. And the major third, and I want you to think about major as just a polarity. It's just polarity. That means its minor inverted value would simply be negative polarity. It doesn't matter which one you choose is positive or negative. The major, for all intents and purposes, could be negative also. It doesn't matter. It's kind of like gender. It's just opposite. It's all that it is. So, because in musical interval, everything has to sum to 9 if you've got a third, right? So if we were starting with the note C, for example, we'd say C, D, E. The third note, right, in the white keys is going to be the major third. That's as simple as that is. So you're going to go C to E is a major third. The minor 6th, because it has to add to 9, because these two have to add to 9, always. That's true for all of the musical intervals. So that makes it easier. All I've done here, if I've taken 5 over 4 to solve for the major third, then the inverted minor 6th would be 4 plus 4 equals 8. 8, right? So the full base divided by the 5 of the depth. So 8 over 5. So this is 5 over 4, and this is 8 over 5, right? Equals 1.6. And that 1.6 gives us the minor 6th. Did you know this, Naomi?
I did know this.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So now we've got one triangle that depicts for us, in its form, the exact relationship of the major third and the minor 6th. And the only difference between the notes is that now this would be like, let's call this middle C, right? Now the only difference is this goes E to high C. Same notes, just one starting, what we call descending versus ascending. Isn't that interesting? So there's no other difference. It's the same notes. But when we listen to the major third, people report it sounds like love. Why does it sound like love? Da da. So many songs, love songs and everything, the backgrounds of movies and everything, they love to use the major third when talking about romantic love, or they're trying to teach people that this is a mood shift in the movie. And if you want to make it a sad mood shift, you make it a minor sixth, because that equals heartbreak. Isn't that interesting? So then, when we look at the architecture of a pyramid that has this proportion, from one angle, we can see it as love. It's beautiful. But from a different perspective, in the seed of love, in the duality experience, because of the square root of 2, is also the seed of heartbreak. And the only thing that separates these two things is time. Because what this really is the order. It's about the order. Which note is played first? So love played backwards is effectively heartbreak. Love played backwards is heartbreak. That's deep. That's some deep stuff. So it really depends on how we perceive the world around us, the experience that we ultimately have with the world. And just like the square root of 2, we may not actually see that the square root of 2, we think that it's this negative, ugly, unattractive aspect of existence. But what we're not really seeing and understanding is how that duality brings us to the stage of awakening and eventually into enlightenment. That is why we suffer, so that we can learn and that we chose it all. And when we realize that we chose it all becomes beautiful. Totally different. So, now let's take this and expand it. So do you understand now the concepts of the height over 1/2 the base and the full base over the depth, which is also the height, is going to give me the inverted musical interval. And the inverted musical interval must always add, if it's a third, then you have to add a sixth. Right? And the way I got there was just the keys, C, D, E, the white keys. Right? If you're including the black keys, it'll be 5. So C, C sharp, D, right? D sharp or E flat, E, the 5th. So we now understand the concept of musical interval. Now where else do we see this? So let's draw this out. And let's start with 2/1. Right? Which could also be then seen as the square root of 2. Right? Square root of 2. Because the number 2 doesn't need anything more than to square itself or square root itself. It can do that. That's part of it. Right? This is part of the thing that when I say 0 to the power of 0 equals 1, that's not a metaphorical thing. It's real. 0 to the power of 0 is actually 1. There's mathematical proofs on this. It's correct. It's not just because everything to the power of 0 is 1, which also happens to be the case. But in this case, you'll actually see a curve. It literally creates the number 1. If we take 0 to the power of 0.00005, right, you're going to find that this ends up becoming 0.99999, right, and then some other number at the end. It starts to converge towards the number 1. It doesn't matter how many you put on here. It basically happens like that. So 0 to the power of 0 and 0.00005 to the power of 0.00005 equals 0.99999. And as you get towards 0 to the power of 0, it literally converges to 1. So that you could say that's like nothingness to the power of nothing equals everything? Yeah, that's right. And then it separates. light separates. So let's start with 2 over 1. And this is the diminished fifth. The diminished fifth in music is the nastiest sounding music. It's the stuff that, it's not only heartbreak, it's like the evil. Dun, dun, dun. It's like this evil sound type thing. And it has the same value, right? Because if I was going to take, right, it's also related to the augmented fourth. Right? So effectively, you've got, this situation, and what that would be if we did that in the triangle, be root 2 over 1, but then you double the 1, it becomes root 2 over 2. Right? And that becomes the augmented fourth. Okay, so from there, and we see these two are connected. And think of it in terms of the triangle. It's the exact same thing. The height over 1/2 the base, and then the full base, it's inverted over its depth. Okay? So now what's the next one going to be? Right? We could say that the next is going to be the perfect fourth. Right? So the perfect fourth is going to be 4 over 3. 4 over 3. So 4 over 3 is also going to then give us its inverse of the perfect fifth. Now the perfect fifth and the perfect fourth are the only ones that don't change to this sort of negative connotation of, this opposite polarity. The polarity remains the same, right? So we've got these two, and remember they have to add to 9. Fifth and fourth equals 9th. Fourth and fifth also equals 9th. So then the perfect fifth is going to be this number doubled, remember, full base, over the depth. So now it's going to be 6 over 4. But we can reduce that down, remember this in school, to what's this? You cut it in half, 3 over 2. Okay? So this is the ratio. And the numbers, you would look at this, 4 divided by 3 is just 1.333, repeating, right? And then this is going to be 1.5, and this is 1.4142, right? So if we go to the next one, it's going to be, I want to go to the major third. So the major third is going to be 5 over 4 in Pythagorean tuning, which is 1.25, and we did this example already. So we know that its opposite is the minor, so now we've got this polarity shift. The minor sixth. And the minor sixth is going to be 8 over 5, which is equal to, put it right here, 8 over 5 equal to 1.6. That's the inverse, right? So then we're going to go to the next one, which is going to be the the major second, right? The major second, and actually I have all this down here, so I don't have to remember all of it. So the major second, I'll do all the majors on top and all the minors on the bottom. So the major, well no, actually I'll go to the minor third. I'll do it the way I did it on the thing so everyone can study it that way and not be confused. So the minor third. We know immediately what must its opposite be. What's the inverted going to be of a minor third?
Major sixth.
Major sixth, right? So major sixth. So you guys didn't think you were going to get a music theory lesson today. So we had the minor sixth, now we have the major sixth, right? And so this is going to be positive and this is going to be negative, okay? And the ratio of the minor sixth, you can put it over here for a second so they can see, the minor third, right, is 6 over 5. Right? And the major sixth is going to be twice that, so 10 over
6.
6.
Yep.
Right? Okay. So now we'll take this to the next level, and after the minor third, it goes to the major second. And the major second is going to be 9/8. So the major second is 9/8 ratio. So this is positive. So then its inverted value is going to be what? Major second becomes
Minor seventh.
minor seventh. Okay? And then we're going to take this 16 over 9. Right? So then the next one we have on this is going to be the minor second. Right? Which then we know that its opposite is going to be the major
Seventh.
seventh. Okay, so the minor second and the major seventh, right, comes out to be, minor second is 25 over 24. Okay, so then its opposite is going to be what? 48 over 25. Right?
Yep.
Now you're going to see that all of this connects to Egypt. So the next one is unison. Right? So unison is just everyone singing the same note, and it's 1, right? And then a doubled octave down here is just 2. Right? It doubles. So from this, starting with any note, you can populate an entire scale. Right?
Yep.
So if you started with unison being A, this would be A sharp, right? B, C, C sharp, D, D sharp, right? This is going to be perfect fifth is going to be E. Minor sixth is going to be E sharp or F. Major sixth is F sharp. Minor seventh is going to be G, and then G sharp, and then A again. Look familiar?
Yep.
Pretty cool, right? So this is your whole scale. Now, what we can figure out is if we took each of these values as right triangles, let's find what the slope angle would be for these as right triangles. Now, in this particular case, we'll start from this one right here. So 4 over 3 is a 3, 4, 5 triangle, right? So it will have a 53.13 degree angle of slope. Okay, and of course, that's going to still be the same even whether it's minor or major, right? It doesn't matter. So it's still going to be the same. So this 4 over 3 is going to be related to the 6 over 4, which is still 53.13 degrees. Do you agree with that, Naomi?
Yep.
Okay, so 5 over 4 is going to be 51, and you could do this on like Wolfram Alpha or on right triangle calculators to check all this math. Let's go ahead. The next one's going to be 51.34 degrees, 5 over 4. And of course, this one is also going to be 51.34 degrees. And then this one, 6 over 5, is going to be a 1.2 ratio, right? So that's 1.2 ratio, right? And the 6 over 5 relationship is going to end up being, if we take this, you know what, I have to remember off the top of my head on this one. I think it'll come out to be 60 when it's a doubled octave. It's going to be, at a doubled octave, it's going to be 67.38 degrees. So that's been doubled, which is important. I'll come back to this. And then 9 over 8 gives us, I believe, a 40, the 9 over 8 gives us 48.366 degrees. Okay? And then 25 over 24 gives us a 46.169 degrees. Okay? So the octave doubled would simply be this number doubled. 6 becomes 12, doubles the octave, 12 over 5. That's all you would do. So that's the angle related to that. So it's an octave doubled form of the minor third, okay? So these numbers then are going to match all the way down. So it's going to be the major sixth ties to the minor third, so it's 67.38 degrees, and then 48.36 degrees, and 46.169 degrees, and then basically then you have a doubled octave. You have a doubled octave. So, do these degrees seem to match anything? Well, they do. And when you look at this one as actually this 2 over 1 relationship, putting this as 1 pi relationship, it ends up giving you 51.8539 degrees. So why 1 pi? 1 would be the diameter of a circle with circumference of pi. And there's a reason for this later on, which relates back to the root 2, as well as to where the use of irrational numbers comes into this. And it becomes very important. So we've got all these numbers, we've got the full scale. Now, what can we associate this with? Well, the first thing I would associate this with, for the augmented fifth and diminished fourth, or augmented fourth and diminished fifth, excuse me, is the Great Pyramid. Because the Great Pyramid is 2, and its height, right, over its base of 1 pi. So that's, okay, that's interesting. So yes, that is the Great Pyramid. Okay, and that's going to give us a slope of 51.8539 degrees. Just so happens that with this particular one, if I take half of the base, make a square from half the base, and then I take a circle, actually like this, then I take a circle that goes like this, around from the base of the pyramid to the top of the pyramid. This will have a value of x as its circumference, no matter what unit of measure you use. And this will also have a y value as its perimeter. And the perimeter will equal the circumference. 100%. It's a perfect match. And that's only with 2 over 1 pi as its base. All right, so what's going on here? So then the next one was the perfect fourth. So the perfect fourth is going to give us a 3, 4, 5 triangle. It's a slightly more steep triangle. So it's 4 over 3, and that becomes 5. And this pyramid is very, very unique because it also has this circle that in this unit of measure, of the same one used for the musical intervals, gives us a perfect circle. The perfect circle that has 4 pi as its area and 4 pi as its circumference, so equal. So whereas the Great Pyramid, so this is the Great Pyramid, Great Pyramid has a different characteristic. It has a circle from its base to its top that is the only circle whose area equals its circumference from a ratio perspective. So you have the perfect circle. The perfect circle. Here you have a perfect squaring of the circle of the Great Pyramid. Perfectly squared circle. Okay? So then the next one, which I'll do down here, which would be related, so I could just pull all these together just like this. Right, so you can see. Just like that. And every time it's summing to 9. How to remember this. And then double octave, of course. This goes all the way up, just like that. It's a wave. So now the next pyramid is going to be the one that's connected to the major third. The major third and the minor sixth. And this one is going to be 5 over 4. So 5 over 4 and 8 over 5 would give you its inverted value. And that's giving us the major third. So this one represents, as I said, love. The perfect fourth and perfect fifth represent stability. This is what people have answered in peer-reviewed studies of what they feel when they listen to these interval relationships. So 5 over 4 gives us this major third relationship. So the major third and minor sixth as well, because it's 8 over 5 and 5 over 4. And this happens to be the Menkaure pyramid. So that's now the third pyramid on the Giza Plateau. So this gives us 51.34 degrees. And those are exact values. And the Khafre pyramid, I forgot to say, is 53.13 degrees. That's the exact measured value. So wait a minute. The 3 pyramids on Giza Plateau are the first musical intervals, starting from the center, expanding out, and literally in the exact order. So the diminished fifth, augmented fourth, the Great Pyramid, the perfect fourth and the perfect fifth, Khafre, and the major third and the minor sixth, Menkaure, in that order. Huh. Kind of interesting. So, but what about the rest? That's interesting. And what about this? So if this is the perfect circle, can Menkaure make the perfect square by taking its base? So this is going to be the vertical axis of y. Now we're going to look at the male axis. So this y is feminine, the male axis of the horizontal axis. And we're going to take half of the square, just like we did on the Great Pyramid right here, half of the base. If we draw a square that goes to half the base, it has a very unique characteristic that shows up. So here's a square, right? And this is not the best square, but never mind. When I draw a circle that connects this, the points of the square will overlap the point of the circle. So it intersects the circle exactly. And you could try this. So you take a circle from the top to the bottom, and this square is the only square that will have 4 times 4 sides equals perimeter equals area. So proportionally, we now have the perfect square. The perfect square, which represents the masculine form. And you've got the feminine here. And the squaring of the circle is when masculine and feminine come into balance. Right? Mm-hmm. So you've got the perfect square with Menkaure, the perfect circle with Khafre, and the perfect squaring of the circle of the Great Pyramid. And those are matching the proportions of 5 over 4, 4 over 3, and 2 over 1 pi. It's the same as 2 over 1. That's fascinating. So inside this also, as it being 2 over 1, could also be implied that hidden within it, on the one aspect, you could look at that as 2 over 1 is a doubled octave. Because through the Great Pyramid, you can double the octave. But also hidden inside of that is this root 2 relationship that is the diminished fifth. The duality. The hardness of the world. So what other pyramids then are all these other ratios? Well, first of all, I started thinking, even though 3 over 2 shows up here, where is root 3 over 2? There must be a root 3 over 2. Root 3 over 2 is the most divine, right? Because root 3 over 2, I told you, is the equilateral triangle when you consider its entire base is 2, and root 3 is the height. So this is saying something about divinity over duality. Divinity over duality. So if we do 1/2 of it, root 3 over 1 becomes one of the perspectives, right? So root 3 over 1, and then its inverse is going to be 2 over root 3, right? Where is that? Where is that musical note? It must be somewhere. It must be somewhere. But where is it? We don't know. We're going to come back to that. So the first thing I started looking for was, wait, if there's a squaring of the circle for the circle and square of the Great Pyramid, and there's a perfect circle for Khafre and a perfect square for Menkaure, then where is the perfect triangle? The perfect triangle has to be somewhere. Where's the perfect triangle? And by this definition, we know that it's going to have to be a perfect triangle based on this. Its perimeter has to equal its area. Now, there's a triangle that does this. It's a 5, 12, 13 triangle. And if we look at its area, it equals 30. If we look at its perimeter, also 30. So if we make 2 of these such triangles, you would have 60 and 60. Area, perimeter. Same thing. So that's interesting, isn't it? You have to count the 12 twice, but it's maybe teaching us something. And what do we think of when we think of the number 30 and the number 60? What do you think of, Naomi?
Time.
Time. So you have in an hour, right, a descending and an ascending aspect going clockwise. And each one is 30 minutes. So maybe this relates somehow to time. But then if we consider the entire base of this would be 10, you've got 12 over 10, which is also giving us something related to imperial and decimal. That seems interesting. And if we superimpose this, the amount of space this is going to take up on the circle for both these sides is going to be 30 degrees of arc, which arc will be a Royal Egyptian cubit, if the radius of that circle is the 1 meter. Isn't that interesting too? So, and we can swing a pendulum, and that pendulum will take exactly 1 second to swing exactly 1.7178 feet. 1.718 feet, which is the Royal Egyptian cubit. So where is this pyramid hidden? It turns out this pyramid shows up in lots of places. It turns out it shows up on the dollar bill. Let's see if I have one. I'm not sure if I have one today. I don't think I have a dollar bill today. Have a look at a dollar bill on the back side. The pyramid that you see on the dollar bill is exactly the same proportion, 5, 12, 13. That's the perfect triangle. And on the dollar bill, it has the Eye of Providence on it, doesn't it? Mm-hmm. Sort of representing something more significant about an all-seeing eye or being able to see. So where is this pyramid? And likewise, where's the root 3 over 2 pyramid? There's got to be a root 3 over 2. Introducing the divine. Now, it turns out that there is another pyramid complex. The other pyramid complex I just visited very recently. It's in a place that is 8,000 meters from the Great Pyramid. And that distance of 8 kilometers from tip to tip between these two places is quite significant, and I'll come back to it in a moment. 8 represents light also. We know from our work and research that the pyramid builders actually used all 3 measurement systems in building the Great Pyramid. They didn't only use the foot or cubit, ancient measurement systems, the cubit being 20.616 inches. They also used the meter because it's all part of the same circle. It's all part of a circle that is 20.616 feet as a circumference. And then when we take this same proportion along this base right here, and we have a radius of 1 meter right here, which is 3.28084 feet, then this 30 degrees of arc, or 1/12 of the circle of arc, equals 1.7178 feet. Takes 1 second for the pendulum to swing each direction. Okay, that's interesting. And there's 20.616 feet, which happens to also be the exact measure of the number of inches in 1 Royal Egyptian cubit equals 20.616 inches. So we've got meter in this one circle. We've got the meter defined as the radius. We've got the circumference telling us the relationship of the foot. And we've got the pi over 6 giving us the exact relationship as well of the cubit, which versus a meter is 0.523599 meters. And that's pi over 6. That is the Royal Egyptian cubit. So somehow this particular triangle has some deep meaning for space and time. This particular triangle has some really, really unique characteristics. And we're still trying to understand this. But it turns out that at this place called Abu Rawash, there are 2 pyramids. And they've been measured. They were measured in 1959. Some people think that they're just pits. They've exploded, like literally exploded. You can see granite blocks. Both were made of rose granite. You can see blocks hundreds of meters all around. I went there. I went to the top. I'll post a video of it. I'll show you guys what it looks like to look down on Giza, because Giza is over here. You got 3 pyramids on the Giza plateau, right? And then 8 kilometers away on a plateau that's 300 feet higher. So here's how the land kind of goes, like this. So let's say this is actually more like this, right? And starting here, there are 2 pyramids. There are only like maybe 15 concourses available still left today of the Djed pyramid, the Djed pyramid, Djed Ephraim. And it turns out that that pyramid was measured to have a 60-degree angle. Now that happens to have a very unique proportion, that 60-degree angle. And in front of it, there's another pyramid that is 0.345 the height of this. So it's roughly a third. So let's place it right here. And this pyramid is a 5, 12, 13 triangle, which has a 67.4 degree slope. So both of these pyramids have been destroyed. But if you were standing on the ground here thousands of years ago, which pyramid would you have been looking to the most? The peak of this would have been comparatively, right, and this is probably not quite in scale. If we're doing it, it would be more like this. Right? Okay, so this pyramid would have been 120 feet higher. So the total peak on this, because the elevation is so much higher, 300 feet higher in elevation, this would look down on the Giza Plateau. And this 8 kilometers distance in between the two. So what's going on here? And this one would have been roughly from this base point right here, 300 feet high. And this one would have been 103.7 feet high. So what in the heck is going on? Why do we not know about these pyramids? Well, because they've exploded. And you can see their blocks all littered around, all around here. Giant blocks of granite that look like they've exploded out. There's a massive crevice inside of it. There's, I believe, a sprawling underground network that we found an entrance point into as well, that the ministry is going to have to go and look into at some stage to see if they can get in there. There's loose rubble everywhere, but it's big, huge rubble. The whole pyramid's made of granite. This is made of limestone on the outside. This is made of limestone. This was made of granite. These two were granite. Most expensive, and this is red granite. It's the same stuff that the sarcophagus is made out of. The sarcophagus here is rose granite. The rose granite sarcophagus is 55% quartz. It's more quartz than granite. It's rose quartz, so it's pink. It is the birthstone of May. The month of May has two birthstones, emerald and rose quartz. This whole thing is a rose quartz. So to get rose quartz there comes a long way from far, far south. It'd be the hardest thing to build with, to build a whole pyramid of, and it was exploded all around. This expensive granite and difficult to find. These two pyramids are matching exactly the ratio of root 3 over 2 and 6 as its height over 5 as its full base. And root 3 is right here. The two missing ones. Now, what's going on? Why is this like this? If you look at the entire Nile River, the Nile River has many temples along it. The Nile represents, you saw a post I did on it a few days ago, represents the Kundalini of Osiris. Every temple is dedicated to Osiris. But why are each temple, why did these people make the same temple for the same person or similar temples up the Nile all the way up? So you've got with Abu Simbel, then you've got Philae, then Philae goes to Kamumbo, and then Edfu, and then Luxor, and then Karnak, and then Dendera and Osirian. Each one of these are at very strategic locations that represent each of the 12, now 24 note chakra system. Dendera is the heart chakra. Luxor is the solar plexus. Kamumbo is the sacral chakra. The throat chakra, which is governed by the bull of Taurus. And why the bull and the 3 belt stars of Orion? Because Orion is in the Taurus constellation, and this is the throat chakra of Earth. The throat chakra is the pyramid complex. That's why it's all related to music and everything leading up to it, and Saqqara and otherwise. All the pyramids are the perfect representation. The isosceles triangle is the way to depict musical form in geometry. I just showed it. So the entire northern aspect of, or what we call Lower Egypt, the Upper Egypt's in the south, Lower Egypt's in the north, the entire Lower Egypt would be the throat chakra and above. And the 7 Nile tributary deltas that basically flow out of the Nile River into the Mediterranean are the 7 colors of the lotus flower, of a 1,000-petaled lotus that comes out of the head of an ascended Osiris, who is also Orion. So this distance from here, now most people think that the pineal gland is right here. It is not. If you want to know where your pineal gland is, go to the back of your throat, the very back, and then go back about 1 centimeter to 1 inch, and that's where your pineal gland is. So it's at the top of your throat. Okay, it's like, you could say it's right directly back behind your nose as well. So the pineal gland has a shape that also is quite symbolically similar to this shape right here. And if we look at the pituitary gland, what is the shape of the pituitary gland? The shape of the pituitary gland looks like this. I'll draw this right here. Good thing I have a big whiteboard here. The pituitary gland looks like this. It's got like 2 sacs that come underneath it like this. And it also represents the female anatomy. But this is also roughly the shape of an equilateral triangle. The pituitary gland is the equilateral triangle. It is the root 3 over 2 relationship. The pineal gland is this 5, 12, 13. The perfect triangle. We have two forms of the Philosopher's Stone. We've all seen the Philosopher's Stone before, right? So I'll erase the octave thing here. The Philosopher's Stone has two depictions. One is an equilateral triangle that has a square inscribed within it and a circle inscribed within that. You've seen that before, right?
Mm-hmm.
So this is equilateral triangle, so this would also be root 3, and then the base is 2, the full base. Each side would be 2 in this case, right? But there's another place that the Philosopher's Stone shows up, and the Philosopher's Stone shows up in the form of a 5, 12, right? So 10, in this case, doubled, or you could say 6 over 5 relationship, which gives you this 67.4 degrees of that slope. And this gives you the 60-degree slope. The slope is the answer to this whole thing. All the slopes of the pyramids. And by the way, I didn't mention it, but the major second also happens to be the step pyramid of 48 degrees. And then the 25 over 24, what does that come down to? Well, I'll show you that in a moment. It's the Giza Plateau as well. So you've got 6 over 5, and this becomes like the pineal gland, right? Which kind of looks like the pine cone. So, but the way to depict it that has been shown by Michael Meyer is a square here and a circle inside there. So these are both Philosopher's Stone. And it turns out that on Abu Rawash Plateau, which is the right distance from the Giza throat chakra complex, turns out that the two pyramids there were the missing ones on my musical list here. And they both have the correct degrees, 60 degrees and 67.4, which is also matching the Philosopher's Stone. So what does this all mean? Maybe it's something about mankind's story and the hero's journey of getting to the Jed. And the name of this pyramid is the Jed. We've probably heard of the term raising the Jed. And why do they call it the Jed Efre Pyramid? The reason they called it a Jed Efre Pyramid was because there's a solar crevice similar to the one that was next to the Great Pyramid. They never found a boat inside of it. But they thought that the person who put the solar crevice next to the Great Pyramid and the boat inside of it must be the same one that did it for his own burial place. But they never found the boat there. I saw the crevice though. And so the locals also kept referring to this place as the Jed Pyramid. They didn't really associate it with a spiritual aspect, so they just said, well, the combination of people referring to it for a long time as Jed and the Jed Efre crevice, let's call it Jed Efre. But actually, it was probably a reference to raising the Jed, which is to get to the top of the Kundalini to the crown chakra. The combination of these two, the pineal and the pituitary, equals the crown chakra activation. The world is right now going through a throat chakra activation. We're coming to an end of that, thankfully. And the last level of that throat chakra activation is going to be happening very soon. And I'm very, very excited about it. Each of the pyramids have musical notes that you can ascribe to it, which I've written down in the post in small writing. And you just simply take these multiples, these interval values, and multiply it by 432 hertz, 432.081216 in precise temperament tuning. And then you get the exact values for those notes. I don't know what each of these notes are going to do. And someone asked me, what's the song being played? I don't know yet. Is there some relationship to the volume of the pyramids? I don't know yet, because I've just used pure mathematical interval to describe and find the exact slope angles. But what I'm purporting here, and what I propose, is that the slope angle reveals to us the musical relationship, because these are exact slope angles. In addition, I believe that we're approaching this notion of the Philosopher's Stone. Now, I've changed the way that I draw the Philosopher's Stone. I don't like this approach, and I put it on the cover of my latest book called Polymath. I'm writing another book right now called Philosopher. So the way I drew it in the book is I didn't believe that the circle, which is the feminine, should be bound by the masculine square. That didn't make sense to me. So I went to say, okay, let's expand this circle to have it go like that, so that it fits perfectly inside the divine triangle of the Trinity. Okay, the divine triangle of the Trinity, of the equilateral triangle. So I placed it in there like that. And instead of taking the square and also inscribing it inside of this divine triangle, I placed it the exact same way that the Vitruvian Man was placed. So that the square actually is slightly larger and it goes outside of the circle, like this. Which, by the way, becomes important. Because when you realize that now I can have room to fit this inside of here. Because if I take this line here down to the base of the square, now I have both pyramids inside one design that looks like this. Just to make it kind of hopefully cleaner. So now you've got the Philosopher's Stone, where the pineal gland is embedded within the pituitary gland. They've actually come together and they've made it. And it just so happens that if you wanted to find where the actual proportions are of the current Philosopher's Stone pyramid, the one that's the 5, 12, 13, it comes out to be the middle, right in between here and one half of this, so the proportion looks like this. I mentioned that this is 103 feet, 0.7, right? So that's going to be 2.4 times 432.081, right? So 4321. And then this would be 300 feet. That's the height. And you got a 60-degree angle here and a 67-degree. So then what are the musical notes that are coming off of that? Well, the musical notes that would come off of that would then simply be, as I said, it so happens that this is 103.7 feet high. Well, guess what the frequency is when I take 2.4 times 432 hertz? It's 1,037 hertz. Just like this pyramid against this base, which is 345.6 feet, right? And you take 103.7 divided by 3, you take the base of this pyramid here, the small pyramid at the Jed complex, which is Abu Rawash, it has a 43.21 feet half base and an 86.42 foot full base all the way across. That sounds familiar too, doesn't it? 86,400 seconds in a day, a close correlate to that. And then the height of this versus the full 300 feet, so 103.7 divided by 300 feet equals 0.3456 ratio that matches the base length of the overall Jed pyramid. So what's the musical note then? If we know the musical note for the small pyramid, what's the musical note for the big one? And this required a doubled octave because it's 2.4, that ratio. That's why I said doubled octave right there, giving it the 67.38 degree angle. So what's the other note? It turns out the other note we would find would be root 3, right, over 1, which equals 1.732050. 1.732050 times 432.081 equals 748.3 hertz. It's 388 or 338. So this gives us a new note. And this note shows up in a unique position that I'm actually referring to as the perfect 6.5th. Shows up in the middle. It's on a 24 note scale.
Oh.
Remember I did the thing on the 24
Yep.
quarter tone scale? Right? So the perfect 6.5th. So then its opposite is going to be the perfect 2.5th. Isn't that interesting?
Mm-hmm.
So that means with a 24 note scale, we have a whole lot of new intervals to populate.
That's true.
But what does this actually achieve? The 6/5 is DNA. 6/5, 6/5 here is the same relationship to this pyramid right here of 6/5, right? This is the pineal gland one. So what it's saying to me is that somehow when we bring these two together, this pyramid that was down here and small like this, of 100, the 0.345.6 or 0.3456, right, of this entire length of the height of the Jed pyramid, in essence, fills up. The whole thing doubles. So it doubles its octave and goes to this height here to create this new philosopher's stone, which is like a portal. Now, there's something very unique about this, because if we do this in third dimension, this particular shape has also another unique characteristic. So let's draw this in the third dimension, just like it is on the dollar bill. Okay, that's the way it looks on the dollar bill, right? Okay, now if all we did was expand this radius, the in-sphere radius, inside here, and that in-sphere radius, so this would be a sphere, right, has an in-sphere radius of 3. This is really unique because this particular proportion then means that I said that this particular triangle was giving us the same exact value, right, for the perimeter equals area, right? And that's 5, 12, 13. Well, when we do it in the third dimension, and the inscribed circle that fits inside here will have a radius of 2. When we do this in the third dimension and we have the radius be 3, then what happens is this entire surface area is equal to the volume. That's kind of trippy, right?
Definitely.
The surface area equals the volume. And by the way, whenever you have an in-sphere radius of 3, all Platonic solids and Catalan solids, which are the duals, Archimedean duals, the Archimedean solids, will all have the same characteristic of surface area equaling volume, which, by the way, is the condition that gets met with black holes. Surface area equaling volume. Now, what's interesting is that if we took this to a radius of 4, because this is radius of 2 for the second dimension, look how genius mathematics is. It's freaking genius. It's giving us exactly the plan. And you could try this on your calculators at home. Go for it. Radius of 3, in-sphere radius, will give us the third dimension where the surface area is always equal to the volume. If I make it radius of 4, what happens? Then a tesseract will have, right? A tesseract will actually have, so you got all the sides of this tesseract, in here, it'd be like this. The tesseract will also have a hyper volume, right, equals its surface area, right? So surface area equals volume, excuse me, so it becomes volume equals hypervolume. So then the next level, to take it to, so this would be in-sphere radius of 4, and then we go to a pentaract, right? So a pentaract will have an in-sphere radius of 5, and the same condition will be met, but now it's going to be hypervolume equals surface hypervolume, or pentaract volume. And it goes forever like this. This radius value is defining every parameter of every dimension. And every form that forms around this shape that's regular will have the same characteristic. Have you seen that work, Naomi?
I have not.
It's pretty cool, right?
It is pretty cool.
Yeah, you can test it though. And it's real. So what are we looking at over here? So this pyramid is three-dimensional. With an in-sphere radius of 3, what's going on? It's kind of like a portal. Maybe ties somehow to the musical notes that we've just figured out. Now, how does the 25/24 relationship work? Well, I'll show you. Let me just erase some of this. Actually, all of this stuff is what I just went through. In-sphere radius 1, in-sphere radius 2, and here's all the values for it, showing it. In-sphere radius, or in-circle radius of 2 gives us an area and perimeter of the square of 16. For a tetrahedron, right, going into the third dimension, in-sphere radius of 3 gives us 374 for the surface area, and the volume is 374. Right? Same thing is true for the cube. It gives us a surface area of 216 and a volume of 216. For an icosahedron, it gives you a surface area of 136.46 and a volume of 136.46. And then as we go to higher dimension with the tesseract, you've got an in-sphere radius of 4, and the surface volume is 4096, and the hypervolume is 496. And this length of radius defines dimensional characteristic. So that whatever is encompassing around that in-sphere becomes equivalent across the next level up of its area, volume, surface volume, hypervolume, pentaract volume, and it will continue to move all the way out. This is like a codex to help us find how dimensions actually work mathematically. Because we like to think we know, but we don't know much, to be honest. We don't know a whole lot. And the more I learn, I feel like the less I actually know. But what I can say is this. So I will see if I can figure out how to do this easily down here. So the pyramid complex looks like this. Now it just so happens, if you take the pyramid right here, let's say this is the Great Pyramid, it's got 8 sides, like that, and then you've got Khafre Pyramid, which is down here, and then Menkaure Pyramid down here, like that. Okay? The proportions of this are 432 and 528. The ratio of the length to the base is 1.222. That's what it is. That's interesting. So from this, I figured out that there's supposed to be a 24-note quarter tone scale, and that 528 hertz fits perfectly inside of 432 hertz, like 2 snakes. I saw this really interesting podcast by Jason Shurka. We brought this guy in and started illuminating the fact that the coronavirus, which is the crown, the word for crown is corona, the coronavirus was not started by bats because they did a DNA analysis on it and found that it was made by 2 snakes. 2 snakes. One was a king cobra. You can look it up, Google it. The first papers that all went out on this, before they all got squelched by the CDC and said that they were bats or pangolin or something else, they were 2 snake venoms. And that's why they were causing the cytokine storm. That's why people were losing their kidney function. It didn't make sense. It didn't act like a normal respiratory virus because it wasn't. So you've got a king cobra and you've got an Asian asp. And those two together, 2 snakes, created a crown virus. Remember what I said earlier about we can look at the square root of 2 and see it all as very negative. And it feels negative, and it's painful, and yes, there's people who do lots of fuckery in the world. But what if we chose it all? What if this is the experience that we needed to wake up? And to realize that all of it is for our own learning, and that the universe is observing itself through our eyes of unique observation bias. Our own confirmation bias. What if all of it was planned by us? So what you find is that I can take this whole pyramid complex and I can place it on Metatron's cube. But the circle of Metatron's cube tends to go a little bit higher. Right? So it doesn't quite match this Metatron's cube relationship. And I have a thing I'll post on this as well so you can see it. And it turns out that the relationship here is 25 24ths, which is the minor second, up at the top. And Metatron's cube allows us to find the placement, and I could use only Metatron's cube to draw all 3 pyramids. I believe they're all built at the same time, on the same plan. Metatron's cube is the architectural plan for the 3 pyramids. All 3 pyramids, from the side angle and from the top, looking down on it. So I think we're in for some exciting stuff. New phase happening. I'm going back to Egypt in December on 12/12. I'm taking an epic crew with me, and I could not be more excited about what that's going to portend for us. And yes, we will be singing these notes at the pyramids. And it's all about freeing the voice of Osiris, freeing the voice of Orion. And Orion and Osiris is just a representation of humanity. And when we realize that the square root of 3 combined with the square root of 2 actually create this beautiful triangle of divinity, the equilateral triangle of 60 degrees, the Jed pyramid. It needs both root 3 and the essence of 2. We can look at, from the very beginning, like I said, the circle, right? And the circle, the way it separates out, we can say, okay, this part of it is going to be root 2. And it ends right at 161.8 degrees, right? And then from there, we've got root 3 that makes up the rest. I find this as a beautiful metaphor for how the divine comes into our life to balance the square root of 2. And to me, that is just the most incredible, beautiful thing that brings us back to the completion of the circle. So I'll answer any questions. Maybe you can scroll up and see if there's any questions. How many people are still on there?
239.
Wow, quite a few.
Well, this one just says hidden musical note, like a question.
Yep, that's right. And I believe as I was writing this down, 2 things came to mind. When I was drawing this Philosopher's Stone right here, this reminded me of the story of the Bible of Jerusalem, that it is easier for a camel to pass through the eye of a needle than it is for a rich man to enter the kingdom of God. Because it's not that it's impossible, he just has to get on his knees and go through this small little door. And that's the way it works there in Jerusalem too. There's a small little door, it's not pyramidal. in shape. But there's a small little door that they keep open at night, and the larger door is closed so that people just can't come rushing in. But the key is you have to get on the knees. There's some controversy about what the real meaning of that was, the translation being correct and all that other stuff, but still, as I was drawing this, that's what I was getting. The other thing I was getting was this 748 hertz note, which I'm calling the perfect 6/5 or 6.5, is 748 hertz. That immediately the words that came to my mind while I was drawing it out was the perfect chord that pleased the Lord. The minor fall and the major lift.
Has anyone tried singing or chanting these notes inside the pyramids?
No, but I will say that I have tried. Every time I've gone to the Great Pyramid, something has shifted. And my last trip there, I've not published any of it. I could tell you that Da Vinci's Vitruvian Man is exactly right on. And there's going to be some major news items coming out very soon about that exact fact. He clearly had a map. I believe that the Scanned Pyramids Project team has a map right now that may have even been derived originally from Egypt, but facsimiled in Europe. And I will also say that very soon there's probably likely to be a lot more announcements related to the Scanned Pyramids Project. So I'll just leave it at that. The other thing that I would say is that when I went to the Great Pyramid in April of 22, I laid in the sarcophagus and I said a prayer. I had it was the night of Easter Sunday. So right before, so it was like midnight beyond on Easter Sunday morning in Orthodox Easter in Egypt. It was also the night of St. George defeating the dragons. It was also the night of Shakespeare's birthday. It was 423, so a permutation of 432. I was there by myself, and I said a prayer, and I recorded that prayer. And I didn't really hear it when I was in there, but as I was speaking in my regular voice, and I listened to the recording later, I could hear it resonating in the chamber in a very different way, very deeply resonating in the chamber. And I didn't notice that happening anywhere else. Now, my last trip, I was there. I laid in the sarcophagus. I said another prayer. I was there alone. I was there at a private visit as well. And as I laid in the sarcophagus, this time the resonance of the sarcophagus was not only audible and palpable, it was powerful. It was different than ever before. And I noticed that my voice was not only resonating the sarcophagus, but it was resonating the entire pyramid. And so was when I laid inside the tunnel that ends in a wall in the subterranean chamber. And I said a prayer there also. It was even resonating in the subterranean chamber, which, by the way, there is a face on the back of the wall in that subterranean chamber in the crawl shaft that's only 2 by 2 feet in its proportion. It's very small, and it's all made of quartz crystal. And on the back wall, there's a very clear face that I have not published yet. We found a lot more. We found an Alpha Chi Omega. If you're interested, go to my my Telegram chat. I do post some stuff in there more liberally than I do here on Insta. But basically, there are some massive changes going on. Every time I go to the pyramid now, I see different things. I see more. I see all the stuff I saw before, and I see it all in Technicolor. It's not that it's like some drab wall to me. I see people that did this through meditation. These etchings that are on the wall, these petroglyphs, are done by monks that sat in meditation, and I see them very clearly. Sat in meditation, and they could change the malleability of the wall to make these etches like designs of artwork across all the walls. And the walls are all telling the story of Osiris. It's the story of Orion Osiris going through his life, first as a boastful hunter, then as a man who transcended and tamed his Kundalini. I did a lot of work this last week on the painting that was done by Da Vinci called Bacchus. Bacchus is the Roman name for Dionysus. Dionysus is the Greek name for Osiris. And in this painting, the man sitting there actually has a snake on his lap that someone attempted to paint over to give it like a leopard skin so that it would look like John the Baptist. But even John the Baptist is not John the Baptist. John the Baptist would have had a beard. He was a wild man, in the wilderness. The painting, he has a snake around him. Look at the painting of John the Baptist. Go look at it with high res. You'll see there's a snake. You can even see the snake head. That's what's wrapped around him. It's not a leopard. And I've never seen a leopard skin get stretched so that it's this long thing like a snake. You can actually see the snake. You can even see the Sphinx in the background on Bacchus. I'll be posting a lot of this stuff over the course of the coming weeks. All of this is coming in so fast right now, I can't even fathom, being able to post even a fraction of it, to be honest. But I'm also very excited about the upcoming launch of Orion app, which is intended to free everyone's voice. And I'm very, very excited about the implications of this and what we've built. And we spent 5 years building it. And I think it's going to have a huge impact on the world. And I hope that lots of other companies and other groups follow suit and do something similar. Because I think the world is in a very interesting spot, and it's time for us to remember our divinity. It's time for us to remember why we're here. It's just time for us to transcend duality. It's time for us to choose love over judgment. It's time for us to choose acceptance over looking at the world in a nihilistic way. And realize that what we thought was the ugliness of the square root of 2 and two-ness in general is compensated by the beauty of the Trinity and the divine. Is there another question?
I did have one. Let me scroll up.
If you got a question, go ahead and type something new, and then, because sometimes it's hard to sift through all the comments.
Okay, there we are. Okay, what is the first figure you got when going into the third dimension that is right in an isosceles triangle? So I don't know if it's in something to do with...
Might be right here.
Yeah, like something to do with first figure you got when going into the third dimension that is right in an isosceles triangle. But see, I don't see it.
I didn't do it as an isosceles triangle, but it will. So any triangle, right? So what we found just this last week as well is that any isosceles triangle or right triangle that you can inscribe the number 2 in radius for will have a perimeter that's equal to its area. Now, the only Pythagorean triple, which are uniquely defined, that will do that is the 5, 12, 13 triangle. But other triangles can do it that are not necessarily Pythagorean triples. A 6, 8, 10 will do it, but that's not a reduction down to the perfection of a Pythagorean triple, right? I also believe that the precession of equinox, I'm presenting at a conference in a few weeks, is actually related to this exact same triangle of 5, 12, 13. You double it, it becomes 10, 24, 26. And it's giving us the differential between rest mass energy and total mass energy and velocity, which then gives us time dilation of what happens as we get closer to our sister stars, Sirius A and B. So as far as like an isosceles pyramidal, I think that's what he's asking probably. An isosceles pyramidal triangle around this. I haven't done it around this yet, but I've done it on all of these other shapes that it works perfectly for. So that's a good question, because now it's making me question, okay, what if I used a 3 inside of, in sphere radius of 3 inside of either Caffrey or Minkare? One thing I'll point out as well that was also very important to note, when you put all of this in the same scale reference, right? So, I use the ratio, the simplicity of the ratio of 2 over 1 and 4 over 3 and 4 and 5 over 4, right? So to represent these 3 pyramids. But if you actually were to overlay the Great Pyramid in the same reference, right, with its proportions on top of it, the Great Pyramid square, that is half of its base, will touch exactly the circle of Caffrey in exactly the same way that Menkari does. So what happens is that somehow the pyramid of Caffrey, which is the perfected feminine, will allow the Great Pyramid's imperfected man to somehow touch the circle and achieve the same level of perfection that is Menkari. Menkari pyramid represents the love and the heartbreak, and each of these different characteristics, right, each of these different musical intervals represent different emotional states in us. They literally represent different emotional states. I posted something on this back in January, around January 7th. If you go back into my page, you'll find it. There was a peer-reviewed study that was done about musical interval and emotional states and entrainment of emotional states. Is there another question?
Well, okay, so this is kind of related to that. Can you expand on the relationship between music and mental architecture?
Well, music and mental architecture. So you could say, one of the things we just discovered, and we just posted this as well a few days ago, Naomi knows a lot about this, is that there's a direct relationship. Let's say we have a circle with a radius of 18 and another circle with a radius of 8, right? And then we find a tangent relationship to both of those circles, right, on both sides of this. So then we've got this proportional triangle. Now, if we take the midpoint from this, so if I just hit tangent on all of them, this line's going to show up here too. And the length of this line is going to be 8 times 18 square root. That's beautiful. That's really beautiful. Wow. So wait a minute. Then all I have to do is take a perpendicular line to this one right here, a right angle, right? And that's going to give me the 5. This will be 12 because 8 times 18 equals 144. 144 square root equals geometric mean equals 12. So that's this length right here from here to here. And then this length right here will be 13. So then this relationship, if I continue this forward, and I now just take a right angle from this baseline straight up, like that, the length from here to here will be 14.08333. And that is going to be something we call a quadratic mean. And we're writing a paper on this right now. And this is a geometric mean. Geometric mean. And Pythagoras gave us another mean, which all you would do to find that is then take another right angle from here and bring it down to the base of this line right here. So this is going to be the harmonic mean. And these can easily be derived. So you simply take 169, which is 13 squared, divided by 12. So another way to look at that is the arithmetic mean is 13. So arithmetic mean is 13. So you take arithmetic mean, you square it, and you divide it by the geometric mean, and that equals the quadratic mean. So the triangle becomes this perfection between two numbers that are in radius values. And the midpoint of that in radius becomes a geometric mean, which is fundamental. And so then we also discovered that if you take this further, take 12 squared and divide it by 5 and 13 squared divided by 5, you end up with these values and links around the entire triangle, which then also must be mean values. They must be. So we're publishing this now. Because why would Pythagoras stop at only two sides of the triangle? Doesn't make sense. You have to go to the third side and find the other relationship, and they do define the other relationships, which is quite beautiful. Now, what does this have to do with your question? A lot. Because I believe that everything can be defined as almost bubbles. You can think of it as bubbles or plus signs. So in a field of information, you've got a height versus a base. And from this height versus base relationship, which is really just the two factors, right, of two numbers that are related to each other. We could call it father and mother. And then they create a son, and that son is the triangle. So what does this then mean if we look at our lives and say, okay, I'm a unique number. I was born on the 137th day of the year, right? So, and I would look at it as May 16th, right? Which on Greenwich Mean Time, I'd have been May 17th. That's why they always screw it up, but that's okay. May 16th and 1969, right? And I was born at 1803 in the morning, right? And from that, I was born in this place called Wichita Falls, Falling Witch, in Wichita Falls, Texas. So I could turn that Wichita Falls into gematria, because each of those letters has a gematria form, and simple gematria, and it's going to give me a number series that just keeps going. Now for the third dimension, I take it to the third dimension. So that value, it happens to be, that's the 136th day of the year, 137th day of the year on leap years. And this value taken to the third power equals 137.5454. I then take 1 over that value, and then that becomes this long period cycle. That long period cycle gives me a number that I think is random, but has tons of patterns hidden within it. That's my life path. It has encompassing within it my numerology, my astrology, my MTBI, so Myers-Briggs or MBTI. It has everything in it. My disc profile, my positivity quotient, my everything, because I chose it all. And what I thought was I was successful because I worked hard. Yes, it wasn't that I didn't work hard. Of course I did. But maybe the time I was born and what I chose to experience in this life is why I was what I am. Not because I forced it or pushed it or created all of it in my conscious mind. And then I had to realize that my concept of destiny was maybe just the free will of my higher self. And I'm living in a world of X, and 1 over X is what I'm seeing around me. It's my own unique universe, and every one of us has it. It's not solipsism. You all have your own unique universe. And we're all here to feed a collective of Akashic record of information based on our own observation bias, our own unique experiences. So just for living, congratulations. You're serving the universe in the most beautiful way possible, because through you, the universe is the ultimate philomath that is a lover of wisdom, the philosopher. The universe gets to learn through all of our separated experiences. The one divides itself into the many simply for the joy of experiencing what it's to be like to be separate, and the joy of coming back together as one again. Each one of us experiences this. So as we bring our conditioning biases and our life path to the table, even the things that we think we choose. I was watching this clip of Matrix, I think it was Revolutions or Matrix Reloaded. And there was a scene where the Oracle tells, she's sitting on a park bench, and she tells Neo to sit down. And he says, no, I'll just stand. And then finally he decides to sit down. And he says, I decided to sit down. And she looked at him with a funny look, and he said, you knew I was going to do that, didn't you? Even the things that we think are going to change the future was already pre-planned. It's almost as if the movie's already been written and played, and we're just watching it play in backwards mode. And that means that as we start to learn more things through Mandela effects, history also changes. Things we didn't know existed now all of a sudden start to exist. Abu Rawash is a good example for me. The Bacchus painting, another example for me. I've studied every single painting by Leonardo da Vinci. And yet somehow I never saw this one? That makes no sense. So what we're experiencing is as we achieve higher consciousness states, we can see more and more. That's the nature of expanding into higher dimension. Not just see, but feel. Your senses go from 5 senses with a 6th sense to 25 tangible senses with another, so that's 5 squared, right? 5 squared tangible senses. And then we've got another 11 that are going to be associated with the 6 squared of the 6th extra sensory perception that we have, which is then going to be tied to clairaudience, clairsentience, clairvoyance, clairtouch. All of these things are now coming in as the DNA is going to its higher level. And it's not that the higher DNA and the 12 strand wasn't already there. It was there all along. But until we become conscious of it, it doesn't activate. That's how it works. We look at the stacking of dodecahedra in our DNA, and that stacking of dodecahedra doesn't have an icosahedron in it. But of course the icosahedron must be in it, because all you have to do is connect the centers of the dodecahedron, and you have an icosahedron. So that means that the water has been there all along. And then when you look at the space in between those two structures, it forms a Dürer solid, which is putting water in the structure of 108 degrees exactly, bringing water into a higher state, another state. So what's happening there? It's, of course, changing us. The holy water or spirit water is coming into our DNA, and it's expanding us. It's activating us. And as we become aware of it, it happens. It's just like as you become aware of miracles and their existence, then you start experiencing more miracles. If you don't believe in miracles, you'll just never experience miracles. If you think you can or you think you can't, you'll be right. That's the nature of the world. And I was just reading and listening to the story of Hercules and the 12 labors, which is also tied to the Epic of Gilgamesh. It's also tied lots of the same syncretized type things that are associated with that. But Hera, who was the wife of Zeus, was always upset and didn't like Hercules. And so she kept making it more difficult. She kept trying to thwart Hercules. She put various difficulties in his path, made life difficult, forced him to even kill his own family. And then he had to go on this trail of the labors, the 12 labors, to kill the Hydra and all that. And what you actually realize is that in a weird sort of way, every time she put something in his path, it enabled him to rise to the occasion and be the hero and do it for the right reasons. He wanted to atone for the murder of his children. He didn't even know that his children were what he murdered until after the fact, because Hera had turned them into monsters. He came home from something and he saw his whole family had been turned into monsters. He didn't know. He thought the monsters maybe ate the children, ate his wife. He killed all the monsters ruthlessly. So then he later finds out when the spell is gone that he just killed his whole family. And so he's got to atone for these murders. So in a weird sort of way, what actually gets Hercules to this ascended state where he's welcomed into Olympus by Zeus is Hera putting him on the journey and putting the difficulties in his path. She tried to thwart him, but nothing she did changed the future. At the very beginning, Zeus had already decided, there's too many monsters in the land. We need someone to come and kill all these monsters. That happened before he killed the family. So every time Hera thought that she was doing something to thwart it, to create, a so-called grandfather paradox or completely changing the future state, all she did was play right into it. Next question.
What is the Orion app, and what is the connection between this and the next phase in humanity and blockchain?
So I spent 5 years working on an app that is very exciting. that is not based on this kind of encryption, which is very flawed. Because we have now found, and up until now I've been able to factor lots of semi-prime numbers, lots and lots, and we've done very, very large numbers. But if the numbers were many orders of magnitude, they could be, if the number, the way we looked at it when we did it, is I could take a number which was 10 to the 600th power in length, or 10 to the 1000th power. And I could take any number that was 10 to the 500th and first power, right? If it was an overall number was 10, let's say I have a number to factor that's 10 to the 1000th power. So 10 to the 1000th power, that's a huge number. It's a number with 1,000 digits, okay? That's a huge number. So I can take a number with 10 to the 1000th power, and any number that was 10 to the 501 power distance the two prime factors, right? So it would be the two prime factors are each going to be 10 to the 500 power, right? Times 10 to the 500 power prime factors. So any number that's going to be 10 to the 251st power, right? In distance from the other prime factor. So it could be very, very far apart. Very, very far apart. I could factor instantly. Instantly. And we just discovered why, too. It's kind of the coolest thing ever. Because we figured out a way to do it mathematically that was based on just finding out, because every triangle has to have these circles inscribed with it, as I showed you. But I found something else this week, which was kind of cool, which was like, okay, if I take the number 35 and I make it as a radius, and then I take the square root of 35, and the square root of 35 as a radius is 5.916. Okay, so I take this down like this. All I have to do, so this is 35 as the radius of this larger circle, and the smaller circle is the square root of 35. All I have to do is take a point here and a point here and connect those points just like that. Then I take a perpendicular line to this. I don't need any other information, and it creates a line like this. And then it's going to give me a value of 6 and a value of 1 right here. And 6 minus 1 equals 5. And 6 plus 1 equals 7. Huh, that's pretty cool. So this allows you to factor just by taking this, take a number, take its square root, put a line on it right here, connect it down to here, take a perpendicular line here, and this is going to give you the perfect factorization triangle. The geometric mean of 5 times 7, square root is 5.916, and 5 plus 7 is 12 divided by 2 equals 6. And 7 minus 5 is 2 divided by 2 equals 1. That's what you get. That works. But what we figured out just yesterday is now how to apply this to every number. And how hard was that pattern, Naomi?
Definitely difficult to find.
Yeah?
Yeah.
But did we find it?
Oh, yeah. We did. We did.
Mm-hmm. What did you have to do to find it?
Honestly, it was just a matter of displaying the data a little bit differently, looking at it from different ways. Drawing really helped, to be honest, drawing out the triangles.
So it required us to look at numbers differently, didn't it?
Definitely.
It required us to look at numbers as right triangles, because every number is actually a right triangle. And when you realize that every number then has two factors that make these triangles that sit in these tangent positions just like this, 5 and 7 right here. How cool is that? That's not been known, is it? And that the geometric mean is just this right here. So from that information, the other thing you can do is you take a circle of this, right, and where that tangency is right here, and where this tangency is here, you take a circle of the geometric mean, and it creates the perfect spot where that tangency overlaps. So yeah, it's like a flower of life. right? You've got the petals of the flower of life on both sides of this. So to answer the earlier question, we live in a field of our conditioning bias. We don't get what we deserve, we get what we expect, maybe subconsciously. But that's what we get in our life, and it's already set. But we think that everything is random. And until we realize nothing is random, then we'll never make the connection between our thoughts becoming our realities. Our thoughts are our realities, but we're on a ride at Disneyland in a way. Everything is already preset. So you can relax, lean back in your chair and enjoy the ride. That's what this is supposed to be now. We're supposed to transcend out of the era of pain. Now becomes purpose. And that's what changes the square root of 2, which is pain, dissonance, right? We bring in the square root of 3, and now everything becomes purpose. It's like math with meaning equals philosophy. Math with meaning equals communication, divine communication. Math without meaning is just mindless drivel information. It means nothing. So when you learn it with meaning, it's like experiencing purpose. When you don't learn it with meaning, math is just painful. It's kind of that simple. So what is Orion app? So I saw this coming when we discovered the prime number pattern, that the current encryptions were no longer going to work. And that there needed to be something for free speech. That we needed some mechanism to be able to have and safeguard free speech institutionally. That shouldn't depend on me, that shouldn't depend on my passion for this subject or any one person's passion. That it couldn't be taken down because it's on blockchain. It's immutable. And all we would be is a protocol to allow people, individuals, and communities to create their own social media platforms. Now, there were some major limitations. One was we had to come up with our own quantum and secure encryption that is not based on factorization at all. Because all the current methods are all based on factorization. We wanted none of that because we knew that that was doomed. But what we also figured out was that all of the other platforms have a limit on group chat. So the maximum number of people you can have on WhatsApp is only 1,024. The maximum number of people you can have on Telegram is 200,000, and none of it on Telegram is encrypted. Not even at all. Did you know that? Group chats are not encrypted on Telegram. And unless you click the button on Telegram that says secret chat before you open a new chat from the beginning, that's not encrypted either. It's not even encrypted. So many people like me moved to Telegram because I thought, oh, it's encrypted. At least that'll be safe. Guess what? It's not even encrypted at all for group chats. And I've never even used a one-on-one chat with secret chat because it should be a default setting, but is not. So I decided to create the world's first decentralized, quantum secure, social media app that allows for unlimited size communities. I've built social media stuff before in the healthcare space. It took off like crazy. And this was my vision. And within this, I wanted to safeguard data sovereignty. That's why I did it. That's why I was passionate about this, because I feel, and I strongly believe now, and I believed this 5 years ago as well, that data is the world's most valuable asset, that the best chance for human doings to turn into human beings is actually towards a universal passive income enabled through our data collection that we control, not just through thievery is it taken from us. By the way, Instagram has just announced that they're going to give everyone an onslaught of advertising, and you can pay not to get the advertising. It's going to be $15 a month also. What a surprise. Twitter made a similar type announcement, but they didn't say it's going to be tied to advertising. They just said everyone's going to have to pay. So here's the funny part. So now you're telling me that you have to pay so that they can take your data, which is worth way more money than any of this measly $15 a month? That's why they love the data business model. That's why they're looking to make avatars of every one of us. They can copy my content. They can copy me. They can offer it back to me as a service so I don't have to make content anymore. Good luck with this stuff on that. Are you thinking AI could do this one? I don't know. I don't think so. I don't think so.
AI is not very good at math.
Yes. So basically I created a platform that I'm focused first on the spiritual well-being community. Our team is. It matters not about how I feel about it. I created a platform that will last well beyond me. There's a voting mechanism that communities can decide to employ. It's built on a very robust chain. It's built on a Rust platform, which is Polkadot, also quantum secure. And this is the most exciting thing ever because we have a very fast acting app that I love using way better than I love using WhatsApp or Telegram. I've been using it now for several months. It's freaking outstanding. I didn't want to launch it until it was literally super perfect. And we've got a huge momentum building around it in the community of creators and influencers. This was an app built by creators for creators. You are intended to own your own crowd. You can have and appoint your own administrators as a creator, and you will monitor yourself. It's no different than having a protocol like WordPress. WordPress and Wix has a big difference. On Wix is hosted on their servers. WordPress, I'm taking the protocol and I put it on my servers. So if anyone wants to get into the back end of my website, they've got to get a search warrant. They come to me and I can say, yes, I'm going to give it to you. Or I can plead the fifth. In the case of Wix, the government will show up to Wix. The Wix will just give them all your information. They can't say no. There's no saying no. And then on the other hand, you got to laugh because we've got WhatsApp asking us, sending us letters and stuff, or now messages directly saying, hey, write yourself a message with all your shopping lists so you'll never forget anything. So they can sell it to all the brokers who buy it. That's what they do. That's how they work. So I'm very excited about this platform. In this, there will be a commons area as well. You can follow many people that will be hosting their own social media platforms. It's very exciting. I can't turn them off. We set up a system that it's not up to me. It's not up to any one person. It's decentralized. And I believe that that is the future of democracy. I believe that we have a lot of redundancy in government that is just now become very, very corrupted. Government today is an anachronism in the way that it is set up. The representation is the foundational problem. The whole concept of representative is becoming the harbinger of the corruption. I think we all know and we all feel it. And we all have a responsibility. It was in the Declaration of Independence. It says it very clearly. If despotism starts to rule again, it is not only our ability, but it is our obligation to fix it. I have 4 children. I want my children to grow up in a free land. What we're seeing right now is no longer free. Freedom is not telling me what I can and can't say. It doesn't mean to say that people don't pay the consequences for what they say. Of course, they will pay the consequences for what they say. There are going to be people that say a lot of stupid stuff. That's life in general. But what is specifically wrong with our society is that we have so vilified the ability to voice our opinions that we've all lost the ability to even understand the alternative viewpoint, and we've lost the muscle, it is atrophied, of empathy. Empathy is standing in another man's or another woman's shoes and experiencing what they experience. I've had many times in my life where I've changed my mind because somebody of sound mind and reasoning and heartfelt, passionate discourse have changed my mind on very fundamental topics. I would never, ever want to take away that ability from my children, and yet AI is doing that every day by determining the echo chamber of their own conditioning bias and placing them within that as a cage. I don't agree with it. So this is why Orion exists, and it's about freeing your voice. There is a subscription fee, because today, if you're not paying for social media, you are the product. And guess what? Now you're going to have to pay for social media, and you're still the product. You're paying for the right for them to basically take your data. One example, AbbVie will pay $27,000 a year for type 2 diabetes data of geolocation to track people individually for their clinical trial work, so they can use it as a control against people that are on their drugs, and they can test their compliance. Do you realize the value of your data? If you don't, read Neuromind, M-I-N-E-D. I believe the best chance at a universal passive income is for us to collect and decide what to do with our own data. It's our own asset. And decentralization is the answer. I believe this fundamentally. And I believe that we're moving into a new paradigm that has the potential of changing our entire experience into the next octave. Because that, I said, had to be a doubled octave. The pineal gland requires the doubling of the octave. You have to get past the throat chakra, the 3 layers, which are awareness, actualization, and transcendence of self. That's where the magic is. So we're going into that zone. But at the same time, you cannot have light without the dark. It takes the square root of 3 in combination with the darkness of the square root of 2 to create that golden ratio of what we perceive as life around us, that matter. You can make this entire world as a simulation out of solely right triangles. So anyone who tells me that they've got some other geometric way to do it through an amplituhedron or some other newfangled name, I think it's complete shit, to be honest. Sorry to those people. You can do all of it with right triangles in the second dimension. All information is compressed into the right triangles. This already we know, proven to define the inverse square law. It defines the interaction of gravity and electromagnetism. We know this. This is not up to dispute. We know also that time dilation and special relativity is directly tied to the right triangle. It is nature's mechanism. It's our lack of understanding of true trigonometry and the association of right triangles and the father-mother-child relationship of those right triangles that has led to the crazy confusion that we have across physics today. When you understand that this is actually a simulation, all built on number, that's based on input values of father and mother, or X and Y, and that defines everything around you. If you're a computer programmer making augmented reality, you would know that you make an entire world in augmented reality or virtual reality out of right triangles exclusively. That's the world we're living in. Last question.
What is your interpretation of transcending to new earth? Is that the pineal crown activation?
Yes. I believe that as we go beyond the transcendence of duality, we choose love. And when we decide that, and this is a big epiphany I had, I wrote one day that I believe that enlightenment is when we experience the following: that the embodiment of love and our expression of love supersedes our desire for the truth. When I say truth, I mean an objective truth. Because the only way to get the entire truth would be the sum of all possible subjective perspectives of that truth. And I think that's what source consciousness has done to separate all of us, to look at all the different ways of looking at truth. To experience it all differently, because unless I've experienced all the same things Naomi's experienced, I can't experience her world as she experiences it. I won't see the same things. She won't see the same things. And yet all of it is serving Source Creator. So this idea of our expression of love is the recognition that the thing that underlies all of the duality and the desire for objective truth is the love itself that creates it. It's all love. It's love and non-judgment. So once we make that choice and we go beyond the throat chakra, now we are armed with magic. The 5th chakra is for the 5th dimension. We are now entering, some of us are solidly in the 5th dimension right now. And then beyond that, we have, I'll be right there. Beyond that, we have the crown chakra activation, which is this pituitary and pineal gland activation. The etheric of this 5, 12, 13 pyramid in Abu Rawash going into the pineal gland, which also, when you see the way it's blown out, you can find lots of videos on this online. Abu Rawash is the place. Then, well, not a lot of videos, you'll find a few. Then you'll see that it actually does resemble the pituitary gland. This pyramid exploded from the inside out. We don't know what exploded it. I have some ideas. Maybe I'll share that with you again at some point in time in the future. I think that there's actually one of the biblical stories that relates to this. This pyramid would have looked like ridiculously high, 600 feet. The Great Pyramid, 481 feet for, at least 4,500 years, but probably more like 13,000, possibly 36,000 years, was the tallest building in the world. Depending on what you think about Bosnian pyramids. And there's also pyramids in other places that some think are mountains. Faroe Islands is another one, but at least in what we consider a civilized world, maybe Antarctica, there's that 2-kilometer base possible pyramid. We don't know. But I will say this, that if you're standing on Giza Plateau, you're going to look up to the Djed Pyramid because it takes work to get up there. We're in the magnum opus right now. There's another gallery, I believe, above the Grand Gallery, and I call it the magnum opus gallery. It leads to the throat chakra chamber. And I think that that is not far away from being discovered and announced. I believe there's only one throne inside that chamber. It's a small room. There's no treasure in it. So it's you could think of it as meta throne. And as we enter into the fifth dimension, we'll start remembering more and more and more our former lives. You're no longer bound by time in the same ways. This has been happening to me a lot for the last several years now. It will happen to you if it hasn't already started. Start looking for it. Look for the synchronicities. You'll start noticing the ridiculousness of a lot of things that just don't make sense. And it's almost like the universe is winking at us saying, hey, wake up. One of the things we put into the Orion app is the Maya game, which is another thing. When you play that game, you'll realize, wow, I live in a simulation already. Because it's a mimicking of that. And this game is so cool, it allows you to jump through different timelines. And you can experience a whole different world inside your current world through augmented reality that is super cool. And it's called Maya, which means the illusion. So I'm very excited about the future, very excited about entering into this Philosopher's Stone activation. I believe that that's really the stage that we're moving into now. Philosopher's Stone just happens to have 2 pyramids by Michael Meyer and by all the philosophers throughout time that represent these 2 pyramidal shapes, and they both happen to be the exact same pyramids on the Abu Rawash Plateau. It's an exciting future for us, and I look forward to sharing more with you along this journey. Love to you all, and have a great weekend.
Thank you, Robert.